Okay, can you hear me? Is this working with the microphone? Yeah. Yeah, I never was at this meetup, so I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I'm just going to talk a bit about the app and what I did. So as background, maybe I am the founder of DoneThat. I started with this app in March or something. There's about 100 people paying for it now. And I think to understand the demo, let me just quickly show how it works. So it is a thing that tracks your time and reconstructs your calendar, basically. So, and it does this by taking screenshots every few minutes, taking the screenshots, putting it into an LLM. From the LLM, we know what you're currently working on, what you're doing. So here's like, looks like I was doing some networking. So you recall in Windows, I think, try to do more a rack on, or like some kind of indexing of what you were doing so you can search it. And what I'm trying to do here is do more analytics on top of it so you see where your time is going, what you're working on. But like there's a lot of different, like Rewind was a similar one for Mac, for example. I'm not sure if anybody ever tried this. They pivoted and just sold to Meta after having said they would never. But anyway, I guess that's how it works. And there used to be things like rescue time before that would, for example, automate your time tracking, but they used like active windows, and that is just very inaccurate data. So like basically with this, you can get like actually accurate data on what you were doing. And here you can see the calendar. It then kind of aggregates this up on a higher level. You can kind of see, okay, like how much time did I spend software development versus marketing? Very important for me because I will just code if I don't hold myself accountable to it. And then there's also a social aspect to this where you can basically follow each other, or if you're in a team and like people opt into this, you can see what other people are doing on like a super high level. Let's just go through. A friend of mine, what is he doing here? Developing a sober sports challenge for January. So, yeah, it basically helps you in a team to know what's going on. And also, for example, if you're remote or if you're somebody who has to bill their hours, take the pain away from like update meetings, all that stuff. Okay, and also importantly, there is a chatbot. I have it here right now that you can talk to and query anything about what you did. And it can also kind of proactively reach out to you when it sees you doing stuff that you maybe don't want to do. Maybe like you just get stuck in a rabbit hole and it knows actually you wanted to work on something else today. It'll kind of pop up and help you refocus. So that's kind of how it works. Any questions on the general setup? Yeah. It's Mac, Windows, and it used to be Linux until like 2 weeks ago when Wayland shipped an update, and all of a sudden it's like harder to get access to the screen, but I'll fix it and it will also work on Linux again. Yeah.
How are you dealing with the events on which you don't actually see the name of the event and whatever the heck is there, because it's hidden by the UI?
So,
I mean, if you're looking back at your calendar or whatever, there was a mess. And there's a lot of events which you can't see.
So this, I'm not
like for example, quarter to 11 or okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Nothing there.
This year, for example, I was just not working, so it didn't record anything. So whenever there's a white space here, it just means I didn't do anything. So that means when you see like a lot of white spaces here, it just means I was doing other stuff and chilling. Of course, there is the case where you just have an offline meeting or something, right? Or you do something that's not on your screen. Then you could just go in here and like put something in manually. But the whole point of this is you don't want to do manual stuff. So that's why I built the thing. Make sense? Okay, then I saw that the topic of this meetup was security. I didn't spend much time on LLM security so far, so I was like, this is a great reason to go into this and figure out how to make this secure. And maybe, like, I'm not sure what you guys are aware of, but I basically took like a very MVP approach to security and was thinking through like, what are the worst things that could happen here, right? Like the worst thing that could happen is like people see each other's time tracking data, obviously. But for this, I just have proper authentication and like proper data security in here, so that's pretty impossible. You can try to like lie to yourself about what you were doing, so you could like put, like embed something in the screenshots or like prompt inject somehow that then I get the wrong data, but that's also like not super bad. And you can of course bomb me with LLM things, like there's a chat there, you could just like chat with it forever and just make me poor and kind of DDoS me on an AI kind of level, right? I also briefly, let me see where it is, did a little overview here. I guess for those of you not aware, like OWASP just did like a top 10 Gen AI security thing. It came out like 10 days ago. And basically they also just look at, okay, like in different ways how an agent can be abused, right? You change the goal of the agent, you get access to security, to data that the agent has access to. You use some kind of man-in-the-middle attack between different agents. And I think most of these things are not super relevant for what I'm doing here, but I think it's, if you work with agent, it's like interesting to have a look at. And then also Meta did this thing recently, not sure who saw it, but basically they're saying you can never have more than 2 of these things. Right? So you either process untrustworthy inputs, that's any LLM out there probably, right? Where you get like chat messages, where you get, in my case, like window access, this kind of stuff. Access to sensitive systems or private data. Like you can do both of these things at the same time, as long as like you can't change state or communicate externally, right? As soon as you can do this and process untrustworthy input, all of a sudden you can leak this stuff, right? Or like, even if you don't have, yeah, you can have these 2 as long as you have like only trusted inputs. I would still not trust it because the LLM might hallucinate stuff, right? Like you could have these 2 totally fine. The worst thing that can happen is it sends email to random people, but at least it won't leak anything, right? So what you want to avoid is like having all these 3 things at the same time. And in my case, the question is like, how much change of state can I do, right? I have this agent that he can chat with that has access to a lot of things. You can even kind of email it to do stuff. By the way, I think like email to agents is like very underappreciated and could be like a whole fun new UI. Yeah, I for sure have untrustworthy input and I for sure have sensitive data, right? That's all of your track time. So the question is like, how can we like minimize stuff that's going on here? Okay, then what did I do? I'm gonna try to keep it short. I mean, first of all, authentication, right? I made sure that like all functions that are somehow involved here are authenticated. I did some general rate limiting anyway on like any functions that are being called. I think this is not super relevant. What I then did, I basically, so there's different parts where the LLMs are being called, right? For screenshot processing, for like task grouping, for talking to this agent, like some other places in the code. And to make my life easier, I basically have like one place that's abstracted in the code from which any LLM is being called. And the history of this was that I used to use Anthropic, and they just sometimes were down. They were like overloaded and didn't work anymore, so I needed like some kind of fallback to call when Anthropic was down. And that's why I have this one function that will like make sure I call the right LLM. And since then I used it to like, for example, make sure that all calls always are in Europe, because obviously this is sensitive data. That there's always like some schema control, some validation. And the important thing now is basically for security, I added in a little thing that just for every single call saves on a database document how expensive was this and kind of adds it up per user. And I think it's also like probably pretty standard to do this. I didn't do it before because like, like startup. But I did this now, and then basically you can see this is now, I hope this is big enough. Ordered by the most consuming user. And I basically do it per function, so I can kind of figure out, okay, like what is the most expensive one and where's it cheap. I, of course, had like hypotheses where it's expensive. You have a question?
Are you storing the token count or the actual cost?
I store the cost. So I basically hard-coded somewhere what the input and output tokens per model were costing. And I think I somewhere also have the token count. If we now go into the sub-collection here, I think it stores somewhere input tokens, output tokens, total tokens, and the USD. This should, of course, and this is already the aggregated cost for this specific call.
Do you reconcile the cost anywhere?
So this is the sub thing per like user per message, and then I go all the way up and have them basically on a per user level. I never go up from there. I could, of course, but it's not like decision relevant, because basically the only thing I want to do is like if they are more expensive than a threshold that I set, like cut them off. like it's a bit like brute force, but like basically this should never happen anyway because it's quite cheap what I'm doing. So if it's happening, probably it's like some kind of unintended consequence, an attack, like whatever. Let's just cut it off. I also somewhere in this code have basically like if everything fails in my Google Cloud, because all of this is through Google Cloud, goes over a specific cost, just shut down the whole project. Right? Like I can like manually re-enable it, but like just to prevent like super worst case outcomes where, I mean, I'm paying for this with my own money, right? Like it just lets me sleep a little better.
Can you use the cheaper LLM providers in this case? Probably would be useful as well.
So what I do here, so it's important for my customers that it's this like safe and data privacy compliant. So I use Google Vertex AI, which is like the enterprise version hosted in Europe. And there I use the cheapest Google models basically. It's like 2.5 Flash and Flash Lite, depending on which level of difficulty I'm facing. I offer people to just bring their own LLMs, right? Like if you don't trust me processing your screenshots, which probably is like something reasonable to do for a startup, you can either run them locally if you have a powerful enough machine, or you bring your own API, and then I kind of encrypt your key locally on the laptop and communicate with whatever you bring to me. Yeah.
So where are you actually converting these screenshots into text?
Say again?
So are you converting them screenshots into text, and where does it happen?
Yeah, so to make data privacy officers happy, I made a flow chart of like how the data is actually flowing. Basically, I record it on your laptop, then I do some data processing of the raw data on the laptop already, where, for example, if you have an app that you want excluded, I just gray it out on the screenshot. Right? That was super fun to code, actually. It's very satisfying to just do image manipulation. And from there, like if you bring your own LLM, this stuff goes to your own provider. From this, I take this activity. This is just like text-based information. And this eventually then makes it to my server. And I store the activity on my server because eventually analytics, team sharing, all that stuff needs central storage, right? But like all the raw processing of like the most sensitive data can happen on your machine or on my thing, wherever you prefer to happen.
Because I guess one of the risks is that on one of the screenshots you have like personal health data or something like this.
Yeah.
So you would then basically do this on the machine to reflect all these applications that might have.
Yes, so I have in the prompt that is doing this conversion here, like a big security thing of like, whenever you see like anything remotely sensitive, like names, email addresses, phone numbers, like medical information, just like completely ignore it and only give me the summary. But like that's the thing with LLMs, right? It works 99% of the time. Sorry?
Mute photos.
Yeah, I actually, there's like lots of things in here to just.
That's more often than people think.
No, I coded this up over like a weekend, and then I was using it, and all of a sudden I was watching porn, and I was like, oh shit, like this is exactly what my customers are afraid of. And there's like 100 things in here to prevent this. You can pause the thing, you can make sure you have like work hours configured, but it might happen, right? Like, and I actually had an error that I didn't account for so far happen yesterday, where Gemini basically told me, sorry, can't process this image because it's like some kind of like, I don't know how they called it, but like content that you shouldn't process with these models. It might have been somebody watching porn or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's like the prompting filters this out. It basically says if it's anything that doesn't look like work, just reply with private. Right? Like people gaming, people playing YouTube, and so on. And you can exclude apps. You can make it. You can pause it. I basically try anything I can to prevent this from happening. But of course, it can happen, right? Yeah. Every 5 minutes. And in between I have the active applications data, right? So I know which windows you're opening and which screens you're on. It's just not super informative, right? Okay, you were in Word in a document called whatever, like what did you actually do in there? And I could of course make it every minute or something, but then increases the cost and the bandwidth of like screenshots going through the thing. And I felt like 5 minutes, like lawyers bill on a 6-minute interval, for example. So like it's good enough for them. And I found like just empirically it's also good enough for me. Sorry, your question?
Yeah, I was wondering if someone uses a window open, but it's actually not working.
So I do, locally on the machine, I store 5 minutes ago, or last iteration and this iteration, and then take both and kind of send them off for analysis. And right now I just take the LLM and just tell me like what changed. That turns out to be like not very, it's like somewhat reliable. I try to do like very basic dumb image manipulation of just like subtracting the two and stuff, but that doesn't like, it's hard. But there's like libraries out there that do proper image differences for like automated test cases and stuff, and I just didn't get to implement those yet. Yep.
Do you tell the user when you take the screenshot?
Well, they have like real time. They can just look at it. But if I would do a pop-up every time this thing is taking a screenshot, then you see up there in the bar, if it's orange, it's recording. Right? So you have some kind of visual indicator. But like when I first implemented on Ubuntu, they had this like screenshot animation, right? Like so you're working, it's like ping, ping. It's like it can't really work like this. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so continuing on this question, what if the user is watching the video with a UI doing stuff like we all do, some dude programming? Are you screenshotting the video all the time and then feeding bad data?
So, I mean, I have the screenshot and the activity data. So the activity data would show me YouTube, and the screenshot would show me some coding video. So it's like, at least I can deduct from this that you're not coding because your active application is actually YouTube. Of course, like, I'm sure like you could make like very sophisticated ways of like how to fake this.
Or you're coding in a window and have YouTube on a corner?
Ah, yeah, okay. So, but then I know, I basically, so I have the active application continuous data, which is like a time series of like which application was open when, right? So if you have YouTube open on the corner, that probably just runs without ever being active, right? Like videos or whatever. And I see that your coding screen is active most of the time. Maybe that's a nice bridge to some actual security stuff again. So I said I'm tracking the cost, right? But I also built in here no, I have to find it somewhere. No. Sorry, didn't practice this. But basically I have a probabilistic thing that like just flips a coin in every 100th time. It takes the full call with like the prompt, the full prompt, full data, and a prompt from me before that says like, does this look like the user is trying to do anything here that it shouldn't do or that they shouldn't do, right? And this, like I try to think of like better ways to test for prompt injection, but I think you have to go like super specific if you want to test it otherwise. And basically what it then does, it just sends me an email. It's like, hey, I saw this prompt. This might have been fishy, like just have a look. And that turns out to be creating a lot of false positives. So I have to like tune it a bit more. But it seemed like a good like 80-20 solution to check security. And then maybe one last thing I did is because I have two things, right? I have like all these functions calling the LLM, and then I have an agent that can actively call stuff. And for the agent, basically what I do, I never allow the agent to put in actual, like I always scope the tools by the user. So the worst thing it can do is fuck up the data of the user, and like that's their own fault then, right? It can never send emails out, it can never go on the web. So if you remember this like 3-part thing, the right part of like can actively like change state or interact with the world is just very minimal for that agent. And then the next thing I did is I just vibe coded with cursors like, okay, like please cursor, go through all the functions that are being called by this agent and check if this is actually happening, go through all the functions that call my LLM function and check like if we properly validate all the user input. And basically did like some sanity checks to do proper like input like validation sanitization, and then also output sanitization of the agent, because one other attack vector could be that you tell the agent to like input like some really weird, for example, like HTML as a summary of what I did, and then this HTML gets rendered in the browser and like does funny stuff. So yeah, I think one thing I at least initially didn't think of, that I also need to sanitize the output of the agent, because that could be some kind of other attack vector. I think, yeah, please.
My legal counsel brain is pinging.
Yes.
I feel like I could imagine an employee in one of my business units running this, and then we get caught in litigation, and then we're doing discovery where we're going through all the possible materials that might be involved in this litigation, and it turns out that we now have to send you a letter to say, hey, we don't know when the screenshots were taken or when the problematic behavior occurred. We need like the last 6 months of all the screenshots that you have for the legal purposes.
So the good news there is like I never store any screenshots, right? So it never gets persisted anywhere. It kind of gets sent to Gemini, and then kind of we both forget about it. Right? But of course, like if there is. Well, I hope at least with the enterprise version of the Vertex AI, I used to use OpenAI initially. I was like, can't trust those guys. So I feel like at least
You chose to trust Google?
more than OpenAI. I guess you got to trust somebody. But you can bring your own LLM, right? You can bring your own LLM and use that one. But yeah, so you can ask Google. Or worst case, you could see, of course, the logs of the activity data. I offer an extra security thing where basically, where is it? We have this like high-level summaries of what was the task, right? This is more like a calendar entry. And then we have like all these minute by minute what was happening. For me, I was, I think, watching Westworld here somewhere because I forgot to pause it. And this stuff we can set up so it just deletes it at the end of the day, right? Because I need the day data to kind of figure out what were the patterns and set up the calendar entries. But then all the initial low-level data is kind of useless afterwards unless you kind of want to understand how the LLM came to its decisions. And that can just be pruned every day by default. And I would, if I would use this, I would probably also do this just to minimize any kind of data that's being stored. Yeah.
Would you consider allowing people to self-host their own database?
Well, it's Firebase. Firebase makes it really hard to do on-premise stuff. I feel like the data that now gets stored here is like not much worse than like other time tracking data or Slack data or like email data or like of course you should trust Slack more than me because Slack has been around much longer and I'm like literally like a startup from this year, right? But it already feels much better than the screenshots. But for sure, like having a local. Also, if you run your own local database, all of a sudden, as an employee, I would trust you less using this thing, right? Because now I know, okay, my IT admin can actually go in there and see everything that I was doing, versus if it's hosted on my side, it's at least much harder to like for your lawyer to convince me to give them the data to like all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Did you think about the ethical aspect of this product?
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, a little of background. I know some people in person who were building some kind of not really ethical tools in Russia who helped actually the government to control people. So that's why I'm asking about the ethical aspect.
Yeah.
How are you okay with building such kind of monitoring tools?
Yeah, so my approach here is like I'm trying to build it for like European standards, right? Like, for example, this thing has a I didn't show this, but there's a German mode in here, and that German mode exists to comply with German employment laws, and that basically means like nobody can see anybody's data. Like even if you wanted to like voluntarily share anything, it's like cannot do this because like the employer always has like more power than the employee, and even if it's like something like voluntary, at the end of the day, it isn't because they can kind of bully you into doing these things. So, rightfully so, for like German employment law, this then means nobody can see anything, right? Like, of course, the government could now come and like you can like dream up all kinds of weird scenarios, but like the government can also come to Google or to somebody else. I think one hedge here is like this is all hosted on European servers. That would make me more trusting that the government doesn't just come and like ask for my data. But it's also moving very fast, very to the right. so I guess you can't be sure ever. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything you would change in the security?
I just know working in data centers, the governments can come and ask for the data.
Okay, this is good to know. Okay.
At least in some countries, yes.
I would make it
They
self-hosted.
come in with the police and say, we
I think
need these
ultimately,
servers.
Yeah.
I want to have control of my data and my model, the whole thing.
Yeah.
I would use that if I had full visibility over what is the
If you just want to use it for yourself, there are some local tools you can run. I made
You don't give them, they shut you down.
a competitor site basically, And there is some fully local tools on Mac. There is, what's it called again? No, I think it was down here somewhere. Dayflow. It's a bit similar. There's like have a look at the list. But if you want something fully local, there are some on the list. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.